With aggregate supply, we're going to look at that from two different time frames. The first one we're going to look at is the long run aggregate supply. And the long run aggregate supply is going to show the relationship between the quantity of real GDP supplied, how much we're producing, and the price level. But we're going to do this specifically for the long run aggregate supply when real GDP equals potential GDP. We typically just refer to the long run aggregate supply curve as LAS. So potential GDP doesn't have any influence from the price level. So our long run aggregate supply curve, the LAS curve, is going to be vertical at potential GDP. So it should look like this. So we have price level on the y-axis and real GDP on the x-axis. So potential GDP would just be vertical at potential GDP. So if we had this graph, we would know that potential GDP was $18 trillion. Now we also have the aggregate supply in the short run, or the short run aggregate supply. We call that the SAS. And it's going to be the relationship between the quantity of real GDP supplied and price level. We're going to hold some things constant: money wage rate, which is basically wages, prices of other resources, and typically what we're referring to here is oil, because oil impacts everything that has to be transported. So if the price of oil goes up, then the price of eggs is going to go up, and the price of toilet paper is going to go up because it costs money to transport those things. And we're also going to keep real GDP constant. Now our SAS curve is going to be upward sloping. So it's going to be, the SAS curve is going to be that upward sloping curve, again with price level on the y-axis and real GDP on the x-axis. Okay, so we want to figure out what's going to cause shifts in our aggregate supply. So changes in potential GDP will shift both the LAS and the SAS curve. So if we have an increase in potential GDP, both the LAS and SAS curves are going to shift to the right. Now we learned back in chapter 6 what changes potential GDP. So the first thing was an increase in the full employment quantity of labor. So the more labor we have, the more we can produce. So we're going to have a higher quantity of labor, we're going to have higher potential GDP. So if we have a higher full employment quantity of labor, the LAS and and the SAS will shift to the right. Okay, so also we have changes in capital. Remember, we have two different types of capital. Physical capital is the machines, tools, and equipment that we use to produce other things, and human capital, which is the knowledge and skills and education and training that we have. So if we have more physical or human capital, the LAS and the SAS will shift to the right. And then technology improvements will also shift both the LAS and the SAS curve to the right. So if we have a decrease in any of these, both of the curves would shift to the left. So if we have, say, an increase in physical capital, we're going to see both curves shift to the right. And remember, LAS is just going to show what happens to potential GDP. Now, also, we could have changes in the money wage rate or those input prices, the prices of oil. So the prices of inputs or wages doesn't impact potential GDP. So they will not shift the LAS curve. The LAS curve is only going to shift if potential GDP changes. So if we have an increase in the money wage rate or other input prices, the SAS curve will shift to the left. Okay, again, the long run aggregate supply curve will not change. So we'll see a leftward shift in the SAS curve if the money wage rate increases or other input prices increase.